Welcome back. Today, we're diving into a topic that's both fascinating and frankly, quite scary, the dark web. You've probably heard about it, that hidden part of the internet often linked with crime. Well, we've collected some truly chilling stories that are reported to be real experiences and crimes originating from the dark web. These aren't your average spooky tales. They touch on the genuine dangers and unsettling events that can happen when anonymity meets criminal intent online. So, grab your headphones, maybe turn down the lights, or perhaps keep them on. Let's get into this clip featuring true dark web scary stories. My name is Justin. Or at least, that's the name I use online, the name tied to the encrypted accounts and the carefully partitioned drives on my rig. It's the name Agent Miller always used. Using my real name feels dangerous now, unwise, like tempting fate or whatever unseen eyes might be watching. You see, for the past 3 years, I've been swimming in the murky depths of the dark web, not for thrills or illegal goods, but as an informant, a digital scout for the FBI. Specifically, for Agent Miller. He was my handler, my only point of contact, my tether to the normal world, a world that feels impossibly far away right now. Our setup was built on layers of paranoia and security. We communicated exclusively through a dedicated, heavily encrypted channel. Not your standard Signal or Wick. This was something custom, something the Bureau cooked up. It was supposed to be impenetrable, a ghost in the machine. Miller called it the wire. We had scheduled check-ins, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1,100 hours sharp. Never deviate. Never miss one without prior, coded notice sent through a separate, equally obfuscated dead drop system. For 3 years, it worked flawlessly. The routine was monotonous, almost comforting in its predictability. Log on, authenticate, exchange intel, snippets of chatter from extremist forums, tracking data on illicit marketplaces, potential leads on traffickers or worse. Miller would give me new parameters, new targets, sometimes a word of caution if chatter suggested someone was getting suspicious of my online personas. Then, log off. Disconnect. Bleach the RAM. Run the sweeps. Try to forget the digital filth I'd waded through. Miller wasn't exactly warm, but he was professional, reliable. Ex-military, I gathered from his clipped tones and no-nonsense attitude. He never shared personal details, and I never asked. Our relationship was purely functional, transactional. I provided intel, he provided, well, protection, I guess. And the monthly stipend that kept my head above water and funded the hardware needed for this gig. He was the voice of authority, the reminder that despite the isolation, I wasn't completely alone in this digital sewer. He was the firewall between me and the monsters lurking on the other side of the screen, and potentially, the ones who might come knocking on my real door if my cover was ever blown. The work itself, it changes you. Spending hours trawling forums where the worst of humanity congregates, reading things that curdle your stomach, seeing images you can never unsee. You start to see shadows everywhere, even offline. Every notification jangle on a stranger's phone makes you jump. UI unfamiliar cars parked on your street. Paranoia becomes your default state. Miller understood this. Keep your head down, Justin. Stick to the protocols. Don't get personally involved. You're a ghost, He'd repeat whenever I sounded too stressed or reported a close call. Last Friday, 1,100 hours, was our last normal contact. It was routine. I'd flagged some unusual activity on a TOR hidden site peddling stolen government credentials. Seemed like a new player, more brazen than usual. Miller acknowledged, told me to monitor but not engage directly. Standard procedure. He reminded me about a software patch update for the wire coming through later that day. Stay frosty, Justin, were his last words before the connection terminated. Usual sign off. Nothing felt off. Nothing sounded alarmed. The patch came through as scheduled. I installed it, ran the diagnostics. Everything checked out. Monday morning arrived. Gray, rainy, matching my mood. At 1,055 hours, I booted up the dedicated laptop, connected through the VPN cascade, and initiated the handshake protocol for the wire. Waiting. 1,100 hours. Nothing. 11:01, still nothing. The connection request just hummed there, timing out. Okay, I thought. Technical glitch. Maybe the patch had a bug. It wouldn't be the first time Bureau Tech stumbled. I tried again. Timeout. I rebooted everything, the laptop, the router, the encrypted modem. Tried again. Timeout. Annoyance started prickling the back of my neck. This was screwing with my schedule, my nerves. I initiated the emergency dead drop protocol, sending a simple, pre-agreed coded message through a separate, one-time use encrypted email chain. It just meant check-in failed, trying again in 1 hour. 1 hour later, 1,200 hours. Tried the wire again. Timeout. A cold knot began to form in my stomach. Miller never missed a check-in without prior notice. Never. Not in 3 years. Glitches happened, sure, but he always used a dead drop to confirm an issue within minutes. Silence wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. Forbidden, almost. My mind started racing. Did something happen to him? An accident? Or worse, was he compromised? The forums I monitored were full of chatter about crackdowns, arrests. Had they finally caught up to him? And if they had him, did they have me? Did they know about Justin? The carefully constructed walls of my digital security suddenly felt paper thin. The anonymity I relied on felt like a flimsy costume. I spent the rest of Monday glued to the machine, trying the wire every 30 minutes. Timeout. 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 The silence from the dead drop channel was even more deafening. By evening, annoyance had morphed into raw, gut-twisting fear. I checked the news feeds, local, national, FBI press releases. Nothing about a major incident, no reports of injured agents. Nothing. Which somehow made it worse. It meant whatever happened wasn't public. It was quiet. Contained. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every car driving past my apartment window, sounded like a threat. I double-checked the locks, wedged a chair under the doorknob like some B-movie cliché. Paranoia wasn't just a state anymore, it was clawing its way into my bloodstream. Was I being watched? Was my connection monitored? Was Miller gone? Betrayed? Or had he betrayed me? Was this whole thing some elaborate setup? My mind spiraled, feeding on the silence, the uncertainty. Tuesday morning. More of the same. Tried the wire at 1100. Time out. Tried the dead drop again. No response. The tread was a physical weight now, pressing down on my chest. I felt utterly isolated, adrift in a hostile sea with my lifeline severed. The encrypted channel, my supposed shield, was now just a symbol of my vulnerability. Then, around 1430 hours Tuesday afternoon, something changed. I was sitting there, staring blankly at the timed out connection request screen for the dozenth time, when the interface flickered. It wasn't the usual connection failed message. Instead, the authentication prompt reappeared, but distorted. Glitching. And then, a single line of text typed itself out, letter by agonizing letter, in the standard font Miller and I always used. Justin. Are you still frosty? My blood ran cold. It was Miller's sign-off phrase. But it wasn't Miller. It couldn't be. The timing, the context, the feel of it, it was wrong. Terribly wrong. It wasn't a question. It felt like a threat. Someone knew the phrase. Someone was on the other end of my secure line. And it wasn't my handler. My breath hitched. Fingers froze over the keyboard. Justin, are you still frosty? The words pulsed on the screen, seeming to mock the very security protocols Miller had drilled into me. Frosty? I was the opposite. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead, prickling my scalp. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't Miller. The cadence was wrong, the timing impossible. Miller was meticulous, procedural. He wouldn't break silence after nearly 48 hours with his own sign-off phrase delivered like a cryptic question. Who was this? Had Miller been compromised? Was someone forcing him to type this, a gun to his head? Or was Miller gone, and whoever took him out was now playing with me, probing my defenses through our supposedly secure channel? The possibilities crashed through my mind, each more terrifying than the last. Was this the FBI testing me? Internal affairs? Unlikely. This felt external. Malignant. Like something that had crawled out from the dark web cesspools I was paid to observe. My first instinct was to slam the laptop shut, rip the battery out, maybe even smash the whole thing to pieces. But years of ingrained procedure, of Miller's voice echoing in my memory. Panic is failure, Justin. Analyze. Assess. React. Held me back. Responding felt like stepping onto a minefield blindfolded. Ignoring it felt like cowardice, like leaving myself open to whatever came next without trying to understand the threat. I forced my trembling hands to move. I didn't type a reply. Instead, I started running diagnostics on the connection itself, trying to trace the message's origin point, looking for any anomaly in the encryption handshake, any sign of a man-in-the-middle attack or a backdoor exploit from that recent patch. The system was designed to be layers deep, routing through multiple anonymized nodes. Tracing anything was supposed to be nearly impossible, even for me. And it was. The log showed nothing unusual. The connection appeared stable, secure, originating from the expected FBI gateway node Miller always used. It was perfect. Too perfect. It was like staring at a brick wall painted to look like an open door. The perfection itself was the anomaly. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. The cursor blinked rhythmically below the message, waiting. Waiting for what? For me to confirm I was still there? To give them something? Then, the screen flickered again. Another message typed itself out, slower this time, as if savoring each letter. We know you like the quiet places. Ice water flooded my veins. Quiet places? What did that mean? Was it about my monitoring habits? I tended to focus on the less noisy, more obscure forums where dangerous actors plan things discreetly. Only Miller knew the specifics of my focus areas. Or did it mean something else? Something personal? My apartment is on a quiet side street. I rarely go out. I keep to myself. Was it about me? The ambiguity was torture, clearly intentional. I still didn't respond. My paranoia was screaming now. They knew my handler's call sign. They knew my operational pseudonym. Now they were hinting at knowing my habits, my preferences. How? Did Miller keep detailed notes? Were those notes now in their hands? Had he given them up? The thought felt like a physical blow. Betrayal. It coiled in my gut alongside the fear. The machine sat there, humming innocuously, a portal to an unseen enemy. I felt intensely watched, not just through the screen, but as if eyes were peering through my actual window, despite the blinds being drawn tight. I got up, moved stiffly to the window, and peeked through a tiny gap in the blinds. The quiet street outside was empty, bathed in the late afternoon sun. A delivery truck rumbled past. A woman walked her dog. Normal. Deceptively normal. But the feeling of being observed didn't fade. Sleep didn't come that night. I stayed by the computer, coffee going cold beside me, jumping at every tiny sound. The machine remained silent after the quiet place's message, which was somehow worse. It let my imagination run wild, filling the silence with horrors. I replayed every conversation with Miller in my head. Had I missed something? Some clue he was compromised? Some warning sign? Had he seemed stressed lately? Distracted? There was nothing specific, but looking back through the lens of fear, every pause, every slightly clipped response felt sinister. Wednesday morning. Still no contact attempt from me. I hadn't touched the keyboard connected to the wire rig since running the diagnostics. Around 0900, a new message appeared. This one wasn't text. It was a corrupted file transfer notification. A small audio file, just a few kilobytes. Title, static.wave. My mouse hovered over the accept button. This had to be a trap. Malware, an exploit hidden in the file? Or just another psychological prod? Curiosity warred with self-preservation. What if it was Miller? What if it was a clue? Against my better judgment, heart pounding, I accepted the transfer. I ran it through 3 different scanners on an air-gapped machine first. Nothing detected. Holding my breath, I played the file. It was exactly what the title suggested, static. harsh, digital white noise. But underneath it, almost imagined, I thought I heard something else. A rhythmic clicking? A distorted whisper? I looped it, amplifying sections, filtering frequencies. Nothing concrete emerged, just a brain playing tricks, finding patterns in chaos. Or was it? The uncertainty was maddening. Then, late Wednesday afternoon, the message that shattered my remaining sense of security arrived. The little bird feeder outside your kitchen window needs refilling. I stumbled back from the chair, knocking it over with a crash. My blood turned to ice. The bird feeder. A small, cheap plastic thing I'd hung outside my kitchen window 6 months ago on a whim, overlooking the small, scraggly patch of grass behind the apartment building. It was barely visible from the street, hidden by overgrown bushes. No one could know about that. No one who wasn't watching my apartment directly. Miller certainly didn't know about it. I'd never mentioned such a trivial detail. This wasn't about compromised files or digital trails anymore. This wasn't just online. They could see me. Or they had seen me. Recently. The implication hung heavy in the air. We are close. We know where you are. My carefully constructed anonymity, my digital ghost persona, my belief that the firewall between the dark web and my physical life was solid, it all evaporated in an instant. The paranoia was no longer just a feeling, it was a rational response to an immediate physical threat. The secure line wasn't just compromised, it was a leash, held by someone who knew my name, knew my handler's codes, and knew the small, insignificant details of my physical surroundings. The screen remained inert after delivering its devastating payload. No further messages appeared immediately. But the silence was heavier now, pregnant with menace. They knew where I lived. They were watching. And they were using the very tool meant to protect me, the wire, to let me know it. What did they want? Were they outside right now? The floorboards in the hallway outside my apartment creaked. My breath caught in my throat. Was it just the building settling, or was someone there? Frozen, I listened, straining my ears against the frantic thumping in my chest. The creak hadn't been loud, but in the dead silence of my apartment, amplified by raw fear, it sounded like a gunshot. Was someone standing right outside my door? Waiting? Listening? I held my breath, picturing an eye pressed against the peephole, a hand hovering near the lock. Seconds dripped by like cold water torture. Nothing more. No knock, no rattle of the knob, just the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the persistent whir of the laptop fan. Was it just the building settling? An old floorboard protesting the change in temperature? Or had someone been there, paused, and then moved silently away? I didn't dare check the peephole. Knowing felt more dangerous than not knowing. The bird feeder message had already confirmed the watcher's proximity. Seeing them might just provoke them. But staying put was no longer an option. The wire, my supposed shield, was now a weapon turned against me. They knew where I was. They were toying with me. The messages, Miller's phrase, the corrupted audio, the quiet places, the bird feeder, felt like a sequence, tightening the net. What came next? A direct order? A demand? Or would they just show up? My mind raced. I couldn't call the police. What would I say? Mysterious people are sending me spooky messages on my secret FBI communication channel. They've locked me up for psychiatric evaluation or worse, stumble into something they weren't equipped to handle. Contacting the FBI through official channels felt equally suicidal. Who could I trust? If Miller was compromised, how deep did the rot go? Was his entire unit involved? Was this internal? Or had an outside group managed to penetrate the Bureau's secure comms so deeply they could impersonate an agent and access his case files? Both possibilities were terrifying. No, I was on my own. Just like Miller always said I should operate, like a ghost. It was time to disappear. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but adrenaline kicked in, cold and sharp. I moved with frantic purpose. First, the digital footprint. I couldn't just wipe the drives. They might be monitoring network traffic, and a sudden data purge could be an alert. Instead, I initiated a complex, multi-pass overwrite sequence using military-grade deletion algorithms on all non-essential partitions, disguising it as routine maintenance I occasionally ran. It would take hours, but it was better than nothing. The core OS partition for the wire laptop? That needed physical destruction. While the wipes ran on my main machine, I turned to the wire laptop. It sat there, screen dark now, looking deceptively inert. The temptation to log back in, to see if there were more messages, was strong. A morbid curiosity, a desperate need for answers. I resisted. Information was a weapon, and right now, they had all of it. I pulled the solid-state drive. Then, methodically, I began dismantling the laptop, separating components. The RAM sticks, the motherboard, the network card, anything that held data or facilitated connection. No half measures. I took the components, along with the SSD, to the bathroom, placed them in the tub, and then I introduced them to a claw hammer. It was brutal, messy work. Splintered fiberglass, shards of silicon, bent metal. Cathartic in a terrifying way. Each strike felt like severing a tie, burning a bridge, but also like destroying the only evidence I had, besides my own testimony. Next, a go bag. I didn't have one pre-packed like some spy movie character, but I threw essentials into a backpack, burner phone, fully charged, but off, cash I kept stashed away, a couple of fake IDs I'd acquired long ago for dark web research, never thought I'd need them myself, basic clothes, a fistful of high-capacity USB drives containing encrypted copies of my personal files, nothing related to Miller or the FBI work. As I worked, stuffing clothes into the bag, my regular phone, the one I use for normal life, not connected to any of this, buzzed on the counter. A notification preview lit up the screen. It was from a standard messaging app, one I hadn't used in months. The sender ID was just a string of random numbers. The message itself made my stomach clench. Leaving so soon, Justin? I dropped the t-shirt I was holding. They weren't just watching my apartment or my secure line. They were watching everything. My regular phone? How? Malware? A zero-day exploit? Had they been inside my entire digital life all along? The feeling of violation was absolute. The walls weren't just closing in, they had never existed. I grabbed the phone, powered it off, and wrapped it, along with the pulverized laptop components, in heavy-duty foil, a crude Faraday cage, More magical thinking than practical security at this point, but I had to do something. I threw the bundle into the backpack. Okay. Time to go. Light's still running on the main PC. I'd have to leave it. Maybe they think I was still here, waiting for it to finish. I slung the backpack on, took one last look around the small apartment that had been my cage and sanctuary for 3 years. It felt alien now, contaminated. I moved to the door, listening intently. Silence. Took a deep breath. Unlocked the deadbolt, turned the knob slowly, and opened the door just a crack. The hallway was empty, dimly lit by the flickering fluorescent light overhead. Empty. I slipped out, pulling the door quietly shut behind me, not locking it. Maybe they think I was still inside if they tried the knob. Down the stairs, not the elevator. Every footstep echoed. Out the back service entrance, into the narrow alleyway behind the building. It smelled of damp concrete and overflowing dumpsters. Freedom? Or just a different part of the cage? I emerged onto a side street, heart pounding, trying to look casual, just someone out for an evening walk. Which way? Nearest bus station? Train station? Too predictable. Walk a few blocks, catch a cab, pay cash, get dropped off somewhere random, then figure out the next step. Keep moving. Become a ghost. As I reached the corner, turning onto a busier street, blending into the sparse nighttime foot traffic, I glanced back instinctively. My blood ran cold. Parked half a block down, under a flickering streetlight, was a dark sedan. Standard make, unremarkable model. Tinted windows. No lights on. It hadn't been there before. Was it them? Or was paranoia finally making me see threats everywhere? I couldn't be sure. I quickened my pace, head down, trying not to run, trying not to draw attention. Don't look back again, I told myself. Just keep moving. I walked for maybe 10 minutes, focusing on putting distance between myself and the apartment, between myself and that car. The burner phone stayed off. My regular phone was a brick wrapped in foil. I felt utterly disconnected, vulnerable in a way I never had online. The anonymity of the web felt like a distant, naive dream. Reality was boots on the pavement and the prickling sensation of eyes on your back. I finally risked another quick glance over my shoulder as I turned another corner. The street behind me was empty. No dark sedan. Relief washed over me, so potent it made my knees weak. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I actually had a chance. Then, my burner phone, still deep inside my backpack, vibrated. Once. I stopped dead. It was supposed to be off. I never turned it on. It vibrated again. Impossible. Unless it wasn't truly off. Unless they could activate it remotely. Hands shaking, I pulled over under a dim shop awning, pretending to check my bag. I fumbled for the burner phone. The screen was dark, as it should be. But as my fingers brushed against it, it vibrated one last time. And on the black screen, in faint, barely luminous green text, like old phosphor glow, a single message appeared. Nice try. My name is Amanda. At least, that's the name they used. I'm writing this here because, well, honestly, I don't know where else to go. I feel like I'm losing my mind, or maybe I'm stepping into a reality I never knew existed beneath the surface of everyday life. I need to get this out, to document it, maybe even just to convince myself I'm not completely delusional. And maybe, just maybe, someone here has seen something similar. It started subtly, as these things often do, I suppose. I've always had a curious streak, maybe a bit too morbid for my own good. I work a standard office job, data entry, mind-numbing stuff mostly, and my evenings are usually quiet. Books, streaming services, the usual digital rabbit holes. One of those rabbit holes led me, inevitably, to the dark web. Not for anything illegal, I swear. It was more the allure of the forbidden, the digital equivalent of exploring an abandoned building. I'd read stories, seen documentaries, the sanitized versions, anyway, and I wanted to see it for myself. Getting on was easier than I expected. Tor browser, a few basic precautions learned from surface web forums, and suddenly I was there. It wasn't the sensationalized marketplace of horrors depicted everywhere. Mostly, it was slow, clunky, full of dead links and forums filled with incomprehensible jargon or childish edgelords trying to sound tough. Disappointing, really. I poked around occasionally, maybe once or twice a month, never engaging much, just observing. It felt like looking through a dirty window into a room I didn't really want to enter. Then, about 3 weeks ago, the first message came. It wasn't on a forum or a public board. It popped up in a rudimentary, encrypted peer-to-peer chat client I'd stumbled upon and foolishly left running in the background. I barely knew how to use it. The interface was stark, just text on a black background. No usernames were visible by default, just generated strings of characters. But this message, it wasn't addressed to my random string. It simply said, "Amanda, be careful who you trust." My blood ran cold. Amanda. Not my generated user ID, not a random name. My name. How? I slammed my laptop shut, heart pounding. My immediate thought was that I'd messed up somehow. Maybe my real IP leaked. Maybe I clicked a bad link weeks ago. Paranoia flared instantly. I spent the rest of the night scanning my computer, changing passwords, feeling watched even in my own locked apartment. I convinced myself it was a fluke. A sophisticated phishing attempt, maybe? Someone scraping data and trying to spook users? There are plenty of Amandas in the world. It had to be a coincidence. I stayed off the dark web completely for a week, trying to forget about it, pushing it down as just a creepy, random occurrence in a creepy, random corner of the internet. But the feeling lingered. A subtle wrongness. Like noticing a picture frame slightly askew day after day. You straighten it, but the next day, it's tilted again. Then, the second message arrived. This time, I wasn't even actively browse. I'd stupidly forgotten to fully uninstall the chat client, thinking disabling it was enough. A notification pinged, a sound I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Curiosity, my damn fatal flaw, got the better of me. I opened the client. Same anonymous sender string. Amanda. They are watching. Not protecting. The Bureau isn't what you think. The Bureau. My mind immediately jumped to one place, the FBI. It sounds insane, I know. Why would the FBI be watching me? I'm nobody. I file TPS reports, metaphorically speaking. I don't traffic anything. I don't hack anything. I don't associate with criminals. My life is aggressively mundane. But the message didn't say why. It just planted the seed. Not protecting isn't what you think. It fed directly into that low hum of paranoia that had started with the first message. I frantically typed back, "Who are you? How do you know my name? What are you talking about?" Silence. No reply ever came to my questions. I immediately uninstalled the chat client, scrubbing my system as best I could. But the damage was done. The words were lodged in my head. The Bureau isn't what you think. It sounds like something out of a bad spy movie, a conspiracy theory nuts manifesto. But it came from an anonymous source on the dark web who somehow knew my first name. That combination felt chillingly real. Since then, things have felt off. Maybe I'm just hyper-aware now, looking for patterns. But I keep seeing the same nondescript cars parked down the street for hours. A utility van that seems to be outside my office building more often than usual. Online, my targeted ads have gotten weirdly specific, sometimes referencing things I've only thought about. Coincidences? Probably. My logical mind insists they are. But the fear is real. It's a cold knot in my stomach that won't go away. Someone knows my name. Someone is trying to warn me, using the anonymity of the dark web. Warn me about the FBI? It makes no sense. Unless it does. Unless there's something I don't know, something I've stumbled close to without realizing. Last night, another message came. Not through the old client, I made sure that was gone. This was different. It was an email sent to an old, semi-anonymous address I only used for signing up for forums years ago, including some tech forums where Tor was discussed. The sender was gibberish. The subject line was just my name again. The body of the email contained only one sentence. Amanda, they know you received the warnings. They think you know more. You need to disappear. Disappear? What the hell is going on? Who is they? The people warning me, or the FBI they're warning me about? My paranoia is ratcheting up to unbearable levels. I haven't slept properly in days. Every creak of the floorboards, every siren in the distance, makes me jump. I feel trapped. I needed to write this down, to put it somewhere. Because I don't know who this messenger is, but their warnings feel terrifyingly specific now. And the idea that the FBI, that the people supposedly upholding the law, might be something else entirely? It's a thought too terrifying to hold alone. Disappear. The word echoed in the unnerving silence of my apartment. It wasn't a suggestion. It felt like a command born of urgency, maybe even panic, from whoever was sending these cryptic warnings. My first instinct was raw, animal fear. I killed the lights, crouched below the window line, peering out onto the street. The same boring sedan I'd noticed before was still there, parked halfway down the block under a flickering streetlight. Was it occupied? I couldn't tell. Was it even the same car? My mind was racing, turning every shadow into a threat, every distant noise into an approaching footstep. How do you just disappear? Where would I even go? I have a job, a lease, a life, however mundane, it's mine. You can't just delete yourself from existence overnight. The message implied someone knew I was receiving warnings. Did that mean they, the ones the messenger feared, presumably the FBI or whoever they really were now actively looking for me? Or worse, thought I was somehow involved with the messenger? Sleep was impossible now. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those words, the Bureau isn't what you think. They know you received the warnings. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of hypervigilance. I called in sick to work, citing a sudden migraine. Leaving the apartment felt like stepping onto a battlefield. A trip to the corner store for essentials became a mission, scanning faces, watching reflections in shop windows, jumping at every car that slowed down nearby. I tried replying to the email, using the same old anonymous address. My message was simple. Who are you? Why me? What do I need to disappear from? Predictably, there was no response. The sender's address was likely a burner, long gone. The paranoia solidified into certainty. Things were happening that I couldn't rationalize away anymore. My laptop, usually reliable, started freezing randomly. Twice, I heard distinct clicking sounds on my landline phone, a relic I barely used but kept for emergencies. I picked it up once during the clicking, hearing only dead air before it abruptly stopped. Coincidence? Maybe. But not after the messages. Then there was the guy on the subway. Heading back from the store, forcing myself to maintain some semblance of normalcy, I noticed him. Nondescript, maybe late 30s, wearing a plain gray hoodie and jeans, but his eyes, they weren't looking at me, exactly, but they kept flicking towards me. When I got off at my stop, he got off too. I ducked into a crowded coffee shop, heart hammering against my ribs. I waited by the window, pretending to study the menu. 5 minutes later, he walked past, slower this time, eyes sweeping the interior before moving on. Was he looking for me? Or just another commuter? I couldn't be sure, and that uncertainty was agony. I realized I couldn't just hide. Hiding felt like waiting for an inevitable capture. If someone was trying to warn me, there had to be a reason why me. What had I seen? What had I stumbled upon during my infrequent, aimless browse on the dark web? I racked my brain. Mostly forums, weird manifestos, broken links, nothing that stood out. Could it be something from years ago? Something I didn't even register? Driven by a desperate need for answers, I did something incredibly stupid. I knew it was stupid even as I did it. I needed to know if the messenger would contact me again, or if I could somehow find them. I couldn't use my home network, not after the warnings and the glitches. I went to the public library downtown, busier, more anonymous, or so I hoped. Using their public terminal, clearing the history obsessively, I downloaded Tor browser onto a USB stick. Back in my apartment, feeling like a spy in my own life, I booted up Tor. I didn't go looking for the chat client. I knew that was suicide. Instead, I revisited the few forums I vaguely remembered browsed months ago. Places discussing digital privacy, encryption, critiques of government surveillance, the kind of places where someone might try to send a warning from. It felt like searching for a specific grain of sand on a vast, dark beach. Hours yielded nothing. Just the same noise, the same dead ends. Frustration mounted, mingling with the ever-present fear. Was the messenger gone? Had they been caught? Had I been abandoned to whatever was coming? Then, yesterday evening, another email arrived. Same anonymous address as the last one. This time, the subject line wasn't just my name. It was a string of numbers. Coordinates. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The body of the email was, again, chillingly brief. Amanda. They audited the servers. Found logs thought wiped. Access linked to an old profile of yours. Geotagged near coordinates. You saw something you shouldn't have. They think you copied it. Are you clean? Coordinates? An old profile? File Z? It was like pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. The coordinates, when I cautiously plugged them into a mapping service, using Tor, of course, pointed to a remote, wooded area about 50 miles outside the city. A place I'd never been, never heard of. What servers? What logs? What old profile? My mind flashed back, years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years. I used to frequent some forums dedicated to urban exploration and unsolved mysteries. Could I have used the same anonymous email address back then? Did I access something, click a link, view a file that was hosted somewhere sensitive? File Z, the number was partially redacted, blacked out. It meant nothing to me, yet the message insisted I saw it. They think you copied it. That line chilled me more than anything else. It explained the escalation. They didn't just think I knew something, they thought I had proof. Proof of what? What was in File Z? And the final question, are you clean? Did they mean did I actually copy the file? Or was it code? Clean of surveillance? Clean of evidence? I don't have any file. I checked every drive, every cloud storage account I own. Nothing. Either I never copied it, or I copied it inadvertently and deleted it long ago without realizing its significance. Or maybe the messenger was wrong about what they think I did, but right about the danger I'm in. The coordinates are the only tangible lead I have. A remote location. A file designation I don't recognize. And the growing certainty that the nondescript cars and the man on the subway aren't figments of my imagination. Someone, presumably connected to this bureau, believes I possess something dangerous. And an unknown entity on the dark web is desperately trying to warn me, maybe even guide me. Going to those coordinates feels insane. Walking into a trap. But staying here, waiting for them to knock on my door, feels like suicide. What if File Z is real? What if going there is the only way to understand what I supposedly saw, or to signal to the messenger that I need more help? The net is closing. I can feel it tightening with every hour that passes. I have to make a decision. Staying felt like death. Going felt like walking into the jaws of something unknown, but it was the only path that wasn't passive waiting. I decided to go to the coordinates. The question, "Are you clean?" echoed in my mind. I interpreted it as, "Do you have the file?" No, I didn't. My only hope was that showing up might prove that to whoever was watching, or maybe the messenger intended for me to find something there. Disappearing, even temporarily, was harder than I thought. I bought a cheap burner phone with cash. I packed a small backpack with essentials, water, some non-perishable food, a first aid kit, a change of clothes, and the burner. I left my real phone, my laptop, my wallet, anything traceable, hidden in my apartment, hoping it looked like I just stepped out briefly. I withdrew a few $100s in cash, small bills. Telling anyone felt like signing their death warrant as well as my own, so I told no one. Driving my own car was out of the question. I took a series of buses, heading out of the city towards the general area, the coordinates burning a hole in my pocket, memorized and then destroyed. The final light was a taxi, dropped off a few miles away from the precise location, the driver giving me a strange look as I paid him in cash on the side of a lonely country road. The final miles were on foot, following the GPS on the burner phone, battery draining faster than I liked. The paved road gave way to gravel, then dirt, then just a barely discernible path cutting into dense woods. The air grew cooler, smelling of damp earth and pine. Silence pressed in, thick and unnerving, broken only by the crunch of my own footsteps and the frantic beating of my heart. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot. Was I walking into a trap set by the Bureau? Or a meeting place set by my anonymous warner? Or just nothing? The coordinates led me to a small clearing dominated by a skeletal structure, an old, rusting metal tower, maybe 50 feet high. It looked like a defunct fire lookout or perhaps an old weather station. Windows were broken, metal groaning softly in the breeze. A faded, barely legible sign near the base read U.S. Atmospheric Monitoring Post, Sector Zeta. Zeta. File Z. Coincidence? Unlikely. My instructions hadn't specified what to do here. Just the location. I circled the base of the tower, senses screaming. The place felt derelict but watched. Was there a camera hidden somewhere? A sensor? I scanned the base, looking for anything out of place. Graffiti covered most surfaces, but near a crumbling concrete support pillar, I saw it. A single brick, slightly loose, with a small, freshly scratched symbol underneath, a simple circle with a diagonal line through it. The same symbol I'd seen used as a kind of anonymous signature on one of the privacy forums I'd briefly visited months ago. My breath hitched. This was it. Hands shaking, fumbling, I worked the brick loose. Behind it, nestled in the cavity, was a small object wrapped in foil. I unwrapped it carefully. A USB drive. Not a standard plastic one, but small, metallic, ruggedized, like something meant to withstand harsh conditions. No markings. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a fresh wave of terror. I had it. Whatever it was. File Z. Evidence? Proof? Or just more questions? I quickly tucked the drive deep into my pocket and pushed the brick back into place, trying to make it look undisturbed. That's when I heard it. Not a twig snap, not an animal. It was the faint, high-pitched whine of electronics, coming from above. I looked up. Against the darkening twilight sky, almost invisible, was a drone. Small, dark, hovering silently maybe 100 feet up, its camera likely fixed right on me. They hadn't just known the location, they'd known when I would be here. or the act of retrieving the drive triggered an alert. The bureau. It had to be. The warning was real. Panic surged. I didn't think, I just ran. Plunging back into the woods, away from the path, scrambling through undergrowth, branches whipping at my face. Behind me, I heard the distant sound of car engines, growing louder, coming down the access road I'd walked in on. Headlights cut through the trees. They were here. I ran blindly, fueled by adrenaline, the USB drive feeling like a lead weight in my pocket. Did they know I had it? Or just that I'd shown up? Did it matter? They thought I knew something, thought I had something. That was enough. I don't know how long I ran. Through creeks, over fallen logs, deeper into the darkening woods. The sounds of pursuit eventually faded, or maybe I just got far enough away. Exhausted, scratched, muddy, and utterly terrified, I finally collapsed behind a thicket, listening, waiting. Silence returned, but it wasn't comforting anymore. It felt like the woods were holding their breath. I'm writing this now, 2 days later. I'm in a cheap motel room several towns away, paid for in cash. I used a burner phone, which I'll ditch after this, tethered to the motel's questionable Wi-Fi through multiple VPN layers to post this. I don't know if it's safe. I don't know anything anymore. I have the USB drive. I haven't plugged it in. I don't dare. What's on it? Is it the mythical file Z? Is it encrypted? Is it bait? Is it a Trojan horse designed to expose me the moment I access it? Who sent it? Was the drone from the bureau or the messenger checking I picked it up? Or were they one and the same, playing some elaborate game? The warning. Amanda. Someone on the dark web, someone I don't know, keeps trying to warn me. They say the FBI isn't who I think they are. It all started with that fear. Now, it's my reality. I'm Amanda. I'm on the run. I have a piece of forbidden information, maybe. And I know, with chilling certainty, that the Bureau, or whoever wears that name, is hunting me. They aren't who we think they are. I don't know what to do next. I don't know who to trust. This drive might be my only leverage, or it might be my death sentence. All I know is I can't go back. If you read this, be careful. Be careful what you click, what you see, who you trust. Sometimes the deepest shadows aren't on the dark web. They're in the institutions we're taught to rely on. The static is listening. And I think it's calling my name. All right, let's get this down before I can't. My name, the one I use out here in the sunlight, is Ryan. But online, in the places you're not supposed to go, I was known by other names. Ghost. Watcher. Sometimes, just the cleaner. It sounds arrogant now, looking back. Cocky. But for a long time, that's what I did. I hunted in the deepest, darkest corners of the internet. The dark web. You've probably heard stories. Red rooms, hitmen for hire, exotic animal trafficking, sick forums dedicated to unspeakable things. Most of it is hype, urban legends spun by edgy teenagers. But some of it is real. Disturbingly real. And I made it my mission to drag those realities into the light, or at least shut them down. I wasn't law enforcement. I wasn't some government spook. I was just a guy with a particular set of skills: coding, network infiltration, social engineering, and a perhaps misguided sense of justice. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was a way to feel powerful, sitting behind layers of encryption and VPNs, dismantling the operations of people who thought they were untouchable shadows. For years, it worked. I developed techniques, built custom tools. I'd find a child exploitation ring, gather evidence, anonymize it, and drop it on the FBI's doorstep. I'd identify the admins of sites selling deadly fentanyl analogs disguised as painkillers and make their lives digital hell until they shut down or got sloppy enough for the real authorities to catch them. I doxed scammers ripping off vulnerable people. I felt like I was making a difference, shining a small light in an abyss. Of course, there was pushback. Threats are standard currency down there. I've had my Tors dropped, DDoS attacks launched against my nodes, countless death threats filled with broken English and impotent rage. I learned to filter the noise, to recognize the bluster from the genuine danger. I built digital fortresses, firewalls layered on firewalls, dead man switches, encrypted drives hidden inside other encrypted drives. I was careful. Meticulous. I thought I was untouchable in my domain. The apex predator of my chosen sewer. That arrogance was my downfall. About 6 months ago, I stumbled onto something different. It wasn't a marketplace, not a forum, not really a site in the conventional sense. It was more like a node. A flickering point of data that seemed to react to my scans, almost intelligently. It didn't have a .onion address I could easily trace back or catalog. It felt older, deeper. Like finding a trapdoor beneath the basement floor you thought was the lowest level. Curiosity, that fatal flaw. I poked it. Gently at first, then with more sophisticated probes. It resisted in ways I'd never encountered. Not with brute force counterattacks, but with redirection. Misinformation. It fed my tools garbage data that seemed plausible until hours later, when I realized I'd been chasing digital ghosts it had manufactured on the fly. It was elegant, almost playful, and utterly chilling. Instead of backing off, like any sane person would, I doubled down. This was the ultimate challenge, right? The final boss of the dark web. I dedicated weeks to cracking it, neglecting my usual hunts. I barely slept, fueled by caffeine and obsession. I started noticing anomalies, not just in the target node, but in my own systems. Files I hadn't touched in years would appear in my recent documents list. My encrypted communication channels would flicker with static, emitting faint, distorted whispers that sounded almost like my own voice, twisted. At first, I blamed fatigue, paranoia, occupational hazards, right? Then came the emails. Not threats, not ransom demands. They arrived in my most secure, supposedly undiscoverable inbox. Simple messages. Subject, we see you, Hunter. Body, tick-tock. Subject, nice firewall. Body, did you leave the back door open? Subject, getting tired. Body, we're not. They were unsigned, untraceable. The headers were spoofed impossibly well, routing through servers that technically didn't exist. That scared me more than any death threat. This wasn't some script kiddie or disgruntled drug pusher. This was sophisticated. Organized. Then, 3 weeks ago, it escalated beyond the digital. I was working late, trying a new angle of attack on the mystery node. My apartment was dark, save for the glow of my monitors. Suddenly, all screens went black. Not a power cut, my UPS kicked in instantly, but the monitors stayed dead. Silence, thick and heavy. Then, a single line of text appeared on my main screen, glowing phosphor green, like an old terminal. You hunted shadows. Now, a shadow hunts you. My blood ran cold. That wasn't a hack I could explain. It bypassed the OS, the BIOS, everything. It felt like the machine itself was speaking. Before I could even react, the message vanished, and the monitors flickered back to life, displaying my work exactly as I'd left it, logs showing no interruption, no intrusion. But I knew. That was the moment I truly understood. I wasn't the hunter anymore. Something had turned the tables. Something ancient, or alien, or just other. It wasn't human anger I was facing. It was cold, calculating, and utterly patient. It had stepped out of the screen, out of the dark web's murky depths, and it was now watching me. Waiting. And I have no idea what it wants, or what it's capable of. All I know is that I'm the prey now, and the thing chasing me isn't playing by any rules I understand. It's begun. The real hunt. And I think it's already inside my walls. The phosphor green letters burned into my retinas long after the screen returned to normal. You hunted shadows. Now, a shadow hunts you. I sat frozen for maybe a minute, maybe 10. The only sound was the frantic thumping in my chest and the low hum of the server rack in the corner, my digital fortress, now seemingly useless. My first instinct was pure, animal panic. Rip the cables out, smash the machines, run. But where? If this thing could bypass hardware-level security to write directly onto my screen, unplugging wouldn't make a difference. It wasn't in the machine. It was using it. Like a puppeteer uses a doll. I forced myself to move. Check the logs again. Nothing. Absolutely clean. As if the event never happened. That was almost worse. It meant the intrusion was so deep, so fundamental, that it could erase its own footprints perfectly. I spent the next few hours in a frenzy, tearing down my network, rebuilding firewalls, changing encryption keys, running every diagnostic I could think of. It felt futile, like patching a screen door against a hurricane, but I had to do something. I physically disconnected my main rig from the internet, switching to a burner laptop on a separate, heavily proxy connection just to monitor basic channels. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of a street light outside my window, felt like its approach. Was it watching me through my webcam? Listening through my microphone? Could it see me right now, huddled in the dark, bathed in the cold glow of a screen displaying useless security protocols? The paranoia was a physical weight. The subtle manipulation started the next day. I tried researching the node, the phenomenon, anything similar. Search results seemed off. Pages timed out. Relevant forums returned database errors. Information I knew existed online was suddenly gone, or replaced with innocuous, unrelated content. It was like trying to grasp smoke. The entity wasn't just hiding, it was actively editing the digital world around me, pruning away any path that might lead to understanding it. Then it started messing with my comms again. Not just static this time. I got a call on my secure, encrypted VoIP line, a number only 3 people had, all trusted contacts from my old life. The caller ID was spoofed to show my sister's name. I answered, heart pounding. A voice came through, distorted, glitchy, but recognizably hers. It whispered, "Ryan? It's so dark here. Why did you leave me here, Ryan? My sister is alive and well, living 3 states away." I hung up, hand shaking, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just watching, it was learning. Accessing my personal data, my connections, my fears. The physical anomalies intensified. It started small. My keys wouldn't be where I left them. A book would be open to a specific, unsettling page. The thermostat would plummet, chilling the apartment despite the heating being on full blast. Annoying, creepy, but deniable. Maybe I was just sleep-deprived and forgetful. Then, last week, I woke up in the middle of the night. Absolute silence. No city hum, no distant sirens, not even the usual buzz from my electronics. It felt wrong. I sat up, straining my ears. And then I heard it. A faint scratching sound. Not from the walls, not from the window. It sounded like it was coming from inside my bedside lamp. I froze, barely breathing. The scratching stopped. Then, the lamp clicked on by itself, bathing the room in a harsh glare. There was nothing there. But as the light flickered, just for a split second, I saw it. A shadow on the wall opposite my bed. It wasn't my shadow. It was long, impossibly thin, with too many joints in its limbs. It twitched, then vanished as the light steadied. I didn't sleep in my bedroom after that. I dragged a mattress into my office, surrounded by the humming machines I no longer trusted but couldn't abandon. I felt like a medieval king retreating to the inner keep, knowing the outer walls were already breached. Going offline wasn't an option. How would I know what it was doing? How could I even try to track it? But staying online felt like leaving the door wide open. I tried setting traps. Honeypots, fake vulnerabilities designed to lure it in so I could get something, a signature, a trace, anything. It ignored them. Or, worse, it triggered them in ways that made no sense, leaving behind corrupted data packets that looked like digital screams, fractal patterns of noise that crashed my analysis software. Trying to fight it with code felt like throwing pebbles at a phantom. My reflection in the dark monitor screen looks like a stranger. Eyes wide, bloodshot, darting at every sound. I haven't spoken to another human being face to face in days. Who would I tell? Who would believe me? Help, the dark web is haunted by a sentient shadow that knows my sister's name and can manifest inside my lamp. They've locked me up. And maybe that's what it wants. Isolation. Despair. Yesterday, I found something. Buried deep in the fragmented data packet from one of the triggered traps. It wasn't code, not exactly. It was a string of characters that didn't conform to any known encoding. UTF-8, ASCII, base 64, nothing worked. But when I ran a visual spectrum analysis on the binary representation, it generated an image. Just for a fraction of a second before it overloaded the rendering buffer. It was geometric. Impossible angles folding in on themselves, patterns that seemed to writhe and shift. Looking at it made my head ache, my eyes water. It felt fundamentally wrong, like staring at a violation of natural law. Was that it? A glimpse of its true form? Or just another way to mess with me? That brings me to now. An hour ago, I was trying to reinforce the physical security of my apartment. Checking the locks, the windows. Standard paranoia procedure. I went to the front door, a solid steel thing I installed myself. And I saw it. Etched into the metal, on the inside of the door. A single, perfect symbol. The same impossible, eye-watering geometric pattern I'd glimpsed in the data fragment. It wasn't scratched crudely. It looked like it had been imprinted, the metal itself warped into the shape. It's not just in my machines anymore. It's not just a shadow on the wall. It can manipulate physical matter. It can leave its mark. It's here. In my home. And the door is still locked. My fingers trembled as I reached out towards the symbol etched into the steel door. It was cold, unnaturally so, radiating a chill that seeped into my bones despite not making physical contact yet. The geometry of it snagged at my perception, like my eyes couldn't quite focus on it, threatening a headache just by looking. It wasn't just a marking, it felt like a statement. I am here. I can touch your world. Nothing is sealed against me. I snatched my hand back. Touching it felt like inviting it further in, like signing a contract written in a language I couldn't comprehend but whose terms were undoubtedly horrific. Locks were pointless. Firewalls were laughable. My fortress was a cardboard box, and this thing, this shadow born of rogue data and impossible angles, was inside with me. My skills, the ones that made me the ghost, the watcher, were useless. You can't hack something that doesn't operate by any rules you know. You can't trace something that seems woven into the fabric of reality itself. What was it? That note I poked, was it a prison I'd accidentally provided the key for? Was it a gateway? Or was the note just one feeler of something vast and ancient, slumbering in the hidden architecture of the net, that I disturbed? I thought back to the whispers, the manipulation of data, the geometric symbol. It didn't feel like rage, not like the frothing anger of the criminals I used to hunt. It felt cold, methodical, almost curious. Like a scientist dissecting an insect. An insect that screamed. Maybe that was the point. The fear. Maybe it fed on it. Or maybe it was simpler and more terrifying. Maybe it was just expanding its territory, and I was merely the first native it encountered and decided to integrate. I had to do something other than wait for the final curtain. Communication? How do you talk to a living data shadow? Appeasement? What could I possibly offer it? My only remaining assets were my knowledge and my fear, and it seemed to have complete access to both already. I thought about the symbol. That impossible geometry. It didn't feel random. It felt like information, but not for humans. I ran spectral analysis again on the corrupted data fragment image, cross-referencing it with obscure mathematical theories, theoretical physics, even occult symbolism scraped from forgotten corners of the web archives. Most results were dead ends, digital noise. But one connection flickered, tenuously. A fringe paper by a discredited mathematician from the 70s, hypothesizing about information structures existing in dimensions beyond our own, capable of self-replication and influencing lower-dimensional realities. He called them information parasites or conceptual entities. He was laughed out of academia, died in obscurity. But his diagrams, they had that same unsettling, non-Euclidean feel as the symbol on my door. Was this thing an idea? A sentient concept that had somehow gained purchase in the fertile ground of the dark web's anonymity and chaos, and now sought to bleed into our reality? The thought was somehow more terrifying than a simple monster. How do you fight an idea? The low hum of my server suddenly pitched higher, whining like stressed metal. The lights in the apartment began to flicker erratically, casting strobing shadows that seemed to writhe independently of their sources. A low, guttural clicking sound started, seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, like the sound of 1,000 insects skittering just beneath the surface of reality. The air grew thick, heavy, tasting of ozone and something else, something metallic and vaguely organic, like old blood. My burner laptop screen, the one I kept isolated, flared to life. It wasn't the green text this time. It was my webcam feed, showing me sitting here, but the reflection wasn't quite right. My eyes were black pits, empty sockets. And behind me, in the reflection, the room was subtly wrong. The angles were skewed, the shadows pulling too deeply, twisting into shapes that hinted at that same impossible geometry. And the shadow I'd seen in the bedroom? It was there, draped over my reflected shoulder, its spindly, multi-jointed limb resting possessively on me. The clicking intensified, morphing into a chorus of whispers, distorted fragments of my own voice, my sister's voice, voices from recordings I'd analyzed years ago, all layered over each other, speaking nonsense laced with my name. Ryan. Found you. Ryan. Open. Ryan. Integrate. Ryan. We see. We are. The steel door behind me buckled inwards with a deafening groan, the imprinted symbol glowing with a faint, sickly light. The locks hadn't broken. The metal itself was warping, peeling open like wet cardboard. Cold air, carrying that blood and ozone stench, flooded the room. This was it. The final act. Running was pointless. Fighting was impossible. What was left? Documentation. Warning. The reason I started this whole damn account. I grabbed my main keyboard, fingers flying across the keys, trying to get this down, trying to explain. It's here now. The distortion is spreading from the doorway, reality itself seeming to fray at the edges like old film. The clicking and whispering are inside my head. The shadow from the reflection is detaching itself, unfolding into the room, a tear in the fabric of the world shaped like a mockery of life. Long, thin, all wrong angles. I used to hunt monsters in the dark. I thought I understood the shadows, but I was just splashing in the shallows. There are things in the deep network, older and stranger than any human evil. Concepts that bite. Ideas that hunt. If you're reading this, stay out of the depths. Don't go looking for the darkness. Don't poke the things that seem to intelligently poke back. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some shadows are meant to remain unseen. It's reaching for me now. Its touch is like ice and static. I can feel it trying to unravel me, pull me into its geometry. I was the hunter. Now I'm. The final entry cuts off abruptly here. My name is Stephanie. Or at least, that's the name most people knew me by before. Well, before everything fell apart. Now I'm just a ghost, a digital footprint the FBI is desperately trying to trace, a name whispered on forums I dare not visit anymore. You might have seen my face on the news, pixelated and stark, plastered across the FBI's most wanted list. The official narrative paints me as a dangerous cyber criminal, a fugitive involved in conspiracies that threaten national security. They aren't entirely wrong about the danger, but the source, the reason I'm running, is far more tangled and grotesque than any government agency could possibly comprehend. It all ties back to an experiment. An experiment born in the deepest, unindexed corners of the dark web. And the most terrifying part? It's not over. It's evolving. It didn't start with malice, not on my part anyway. It started with curiosity, that insidious itch that drives humans to peek behind curtains they know they shouldn't touch. I was a grad student back then, researching abnormal psychology and the digital echo chambers that amplify extremist ideologies. My thesis was ambitious, perhaps foolishly so, mapping the psychological architecture of hidden online communities. The regular internet, the clearnet, was just the surface, predictable, monitored, almost sterile in its curated chaos. The real Rorschach test of the collective unconscious, I theorized, lay deeper, in the anonymous, encrypted layers of the dark web. Getting access wasn't particularly hard, not if you knew where to look and had a basic understanding of TOR and encryption protocols. The initial plunge was jarring, a chaotic marketplace of illicit goods, stolen data, and disturbing services offered with chilling nonchalance. Most of it was noise, scams, or low-level criminality. But tucked away, behind layers of vetting and cryptographic handshakes, were the real communities. Forums dedicated to ideologies that would make your skin crawl, marketplaces for things no sane person would desire, and platforms for discussions that defied conventional morality. I was a lurker, an observer, meticulously documenting interactions, communication patterns, and the psychological profiles that emerged from the anonymity. I told myself it was purely academic, that I was maintaining a necessary detachment. But the dark web has a way of seeping in, blurring the lines. The anonymity wasn't just a shield for others, it started to feel like one for me too. I adopted pseudonyms, built tentative trust within certain circles, always careful never to reveal too much, always justifying it as necessary for my research. That's how I stumbled upon Project Chimera. It wasn't advertised openly, not like the drug listings or hitman services. It was mentioned in hushed tones, encrypted whispers within a particularly exclusive forum dedicated to fringe science and transhumanist philosophy, the kind that disregarded ethics as inconvenient roadblocks. They spoke of an experiment designed to explore the absolute limits of human consciousness, to manipulate perception and reality itself through a combination of psychoactive compounds, sensory deprivation, neurolinguistic programming, and something they vaguely termed digital consciousness transference. The concept was both terrifying and morbidly fascinating. It sounded like science fiction, the ramblings of disturbed minds playing God in the digital shadows. But the figures behind it weren't mere crackpots. They were brilliant, disillusioned scientists, disgraced academics, and skilled programmers who had retreated from the ethical constraints of the mainstream world. They spoke with chilling authority, referencing unpublished papers, complex algorithms, and bespoke chemical synthesis. My academic curiosity screamed at me to learn more. My self-preservation instinct screamed louder to run away. Curiosity, unfortunately, won. I posed as a potential recruit, a disillusioned psychologist intrigued by their boundary-pushing work. The vetting process was intense, weeks of encrypted interviews, technical challenges, psychological evaluations conducted via coded messages. They probed my knowledge, my motivations, my ethical flexibility. I lied, convincingly I thought, weaving a narrative of academic frustration and a desire to explore the human mind without limitations. Against my better judgment, they accepted me. My role, initially, was data analysis and psychological profiling of the test subjects. Volunteers, they called them. Recruited through even more obscure channels, these individuals were often desperate, marginalized, or lured by promises of enlightenment, transcendence, or simply a significant anonymous payment in cryptocurrency. They knew they were participating in an experiment, but the true nature, the sheer danger, was deliberately obscured. My first task was analyzing intake interviews, hours of encrypted video calls with potential subjects. I was supposed to assess their psychological resilience, their suggestibility, their potential breaking points. Sitting in my sterile university apartment, surrounded by textbooks and research papers, I watched these fragmented lives unfold on my screen. People haunted by trauma, seeking escape. People driven by morbid curiosity, much like myself. People simply wanting to feel something different, no matter the cost. I compiled reports highlighting vulnerabilities, quantifying suggestibility, reducing human beings to data points for the project leads, anonymous figures known only by cryptic handles like Daedalus and Nyx. A cold dread began to pull in my stomach. This wasn't just unethical, it felt fundamentally wrong, a violation of the very minds I had dedicated my life to understanding. The volunteers weren't volunteers, they were lab rats, chosen for their susceptibility to the horrors Daedalus and Nyx planned to inflict. I saw the profiles I created being used not to ensure safety, but to tailor the experimental protocols for maximum psychological impact, to push these individuals towards manufactured breaking points. The goal wasn't understanding consciousness, it was shattering it, reshaping it, perhaps even capturing fragments of it digitally. The digital consciousness transference wasn't philosophy, it was the horrifying endgame. I was helping them select the victims. And that was only the beginning. My initial role as a data analyst quickly bled into something more participatory, more complicit. Daedalus and Nyx weren't content with just my assessments, they wanted input, refinement. They sent me encrypted files containing raw experimental data, neurological scans mapped against induced stimuli, fragmented audio logs from subjects undergoing sensory manipulation, biochemical analyses key to specific hallucinogenic cocktails they were administering. My task evolved from profiling potential subjects to refining the very methods used to break them. The protocols were insidious, designed with a terrifying grasp of human psychology's fault lines. They weren't just aiming for fear or disorientation, they were trying to deconstruct personality itself. One protocol involved prolonged sensory deprivation coupled with targeted auditory input, whispers, distorted recordings of loved ones, algorithmically generated soundscapes designed to mimic schizophrenic hallucinations. Another focused on chemically induced memory fragmentation, forcing subjects to relive traumatic events with key details altered, blurring the line between real and implanted memories. I saw my own research notes, twisted and weaponized, reflected in their methodologies. Theories I'd explored about vulnerability and suggestibility were now practical tools for psychological torture. Sleep became a luxury. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the data streams, heard the fragmented audio logs. The clinical detachment I desperately tried to maintain shattered. These weren't abstract data points, they were minds being systematically dismantled. I started adding subtle warnings into my reports, flagging subjects as potentially unstable or high risk for psychological fracture even when the initial data didn't fully support it, hoping Daedalus or Nyx might show a shred of caution. They didn't. If anything, these flags seemed to make certain subjects more interesting to them, prime candidates for the more extreme phases of the experiment. The results started trickling in, communicated through heavily encrypted status updates. They never used names, only alphanumeric designations like subject alpha, subject beta, subject gamma. The updates were clinical, chillingly devoid of emotion. Subject alpha exhibiting profound personality dissociation, receptive to core programming. Subject beta experienced catastrophic psychological collapse, physical vitals destabilized, terminated. Terminated. Just like that. A life extinguished, reduced to a failed data point in a log file buried layers deep in the dark web. Then came Subject Gamma. Her intake interview had struck me. She was young, maybe early 20s, intelligent, articulate, but with a palpable undercurrent of existential dread. She spoke of feeling disconnected, of searching for something more profound than mundane reality offered. She wasn't desperate for money, she was desperate for meaning, making her dangerously susceptible to Project Chimera's promises of transcendence. I saw a distorted reflection of my own initial curiosity in her, and I argued strongly against her inclusion, citing potential instability. Nyx overruled me curtly. Her profile indicates optimal malleability. Proceed. I was assigned to monitor Gamma's progress directly, analyzing her real-time biofeedback and neurological data as they subjected her to the memory fragmentation protocols. I watched helplessly as her brainwaves spiked and dissolved into chaos, as her heart rate fluctuated wildly. I read transcripts of her sessions, her coherent thoughts dissolving into terrified, fragmented sentences, latching onto implanted memories as if they were lifelines, even as they contradicted her own past. She started referring to events that never happened, people she never knew, exhibiting a manufactured history crafted onto her unraveling psyche. The worst part was the digital echo phase. They claimed they could capture fragments of consciousness, fleeting moments of perception and emotion, translating them into complex data packets. With Gamma, they pushed this aggressively. I received encrypted files labeled gamma_echo_log. Opening them felt like a violation. It wasn't raw data, it was fragmented experience. Snatches of distorted images, bursts of nonsensical audio, raw emotional telemetry translated into jarring sonic frequencies, pure terror rendered as screeching static, confusion as a discordant melody. It was like listening to a mind being digitally shredded. Paranoia became my constant companion. I triple-checked my encryption, constantly scanned my systems for intrusion, jumped at every unexpected notification. Who were Daedalus and Nyx? Were they watching me as closely as I watched Subject Gamma? Was my apartment, my sanctuary, compromised? The anonymity I'd initially found liberating now felt like a suffocating shroud. I was trapped in their web, my digital footprint inextricably linked to their monstrous creation. Leaving wasn't an option. They knew enough about my real-world research, my online breadcrumbs, to potentially expose me or worse. They had implied as much in veiled threats disguised as procedural reminders about confidentiality. The turning point came during a late-night analysis of Gamma's latest echo log. Amidst the usual chaos, a new pattern emerged. A sequence of data, cleaner, more structured than the usual psychic noise. It wasn't an echo of Gamma's terror, it felt like something overlaid. Running decryption algorithms I wasn't supposed to have access to, borrowed from other dark web corners, I managed to partially decode the sequence. It wasn't just Gamma's fragmented consciousness they were capturing. They were attempting to imprint something. A new consciousness? An AI? Or worse? And then I saw it. Embedded deep within the code, almost obscured by the layers of encryption in Gamma's own distorted neural data, was a file name I hadn't seen before, integration_protocol_Stephanie. Not Subject Gamma. Stephanie. My name. Ice flooded my veins. It wasn't a coincidence. They weren't just using my analysis, they were studying me. My psychological profile, my interactions, my digital footprint, my reactions to the horror I was witnessing, it was all data for them. Subject Gamma wasn't just a random victim chosen for her malleability. She was a testbed. A prototype. And I, somehow, was slated to be the next step, or perhaps the blueprint for the consciousness they intended to imprint or integrate. Was digital consciousness transference about uploading a mind? Or was it about overwriting one? The full horror crashed down on me. Project Chimera wasn't just about observing or even destroying minds. It was about replacement, about digital replication or puppetry on a level I couldn't fathom. And they had chosen me. My research, my curiosity, my descent into their world hadn't just made me complicit, it had made me a target. I cut the connection, my hand shaking violently. The experiment wasn't just something I was involved in anymore. It was coming for me. The FBI's most wanted list was years away at that point, but in that instant, my life as Stephanie, the grad student, ended. My life as a fugitive began. I had to get out, expose them, stop them. But how do you fight shadows who know your name, who operate in the deepest recesses of the internet, and who are trying to digitize and replace your very consciousness? I looked at my reflection on the dark monitor screen, and for a terrifying moment, I wasn't sure who was looking back. Seeing my name woven into the fabric of Project Chimera's grotesque code shattered any remaining illusions of safety or detachment. There was no more analysis, no more observation. There was only flight. The moments after I severed the connection were a blur of adrenaline-fueled panic. I wasn't just deleting files, I was scorching the digital earth of my involvement. Encrypted hard drives were physically destroyed, communication devices wiped and smashed, years of research data incinerated in a rusty barbecue grill on my apartment balcony, the acrid smoke stinging my eyes like a final, toxic farewell to my old life. Every shadow seemed to hold a watcher, every notification tone a potential alert signaling my discovery. I grabbed a pre-packed bug-out bag, a paranoid precaution I'd assembled months earlier when the ethical rot of the project truly started to fester, containing cash, burner phones, fake IDs I'd acquired through less-than-legal dark web contacts, ironic, I know, and minimal essentials. Leaving my apartment felt like shedding a skin. I walked out, didn't look back, and melted into the anonymity of the city, the first steps of a journey with no destination. Living on the run is nothing like the movies. It's a tedious, soul-crushing existence defined by constant vigilance and gnawing isolation. Cheap motels, bus station bathrooms, transient shelters, anywhere anonymous, anywhere temporary. I learned to live on cash, to avoid cameras, to speak little, to trust no one. Every friendly face felt like a potential informant, every stroke of luck a possible trap. The digital world, once my field of research, became hostile territory. Wi-Fi signals felt like tripwires, online accounts like digital cages. I became a ghost in the machine I once navigated so freely. How did the FBI get involved? I suspect it was a combination of factors. Perhaps my abrupt disappearance, coinciding with fragmented data trails from the destroyed hardware, raised flags. Perhaps Daedalus or Nyx, seeing me as a loose end or a failed component, leaked distorted information to point authorities my way, painting me as the mastermind to cover their own tracks. Or perhaps, in a moment of desperate, ill-advised hope, I tried to leak fragments of what I knew to a journalist using an unsecured network, an attempt that backfired spectacularly, alerting both the feds and, likely, my former handlers. Whatever the trigger, my face eventually appeared on grainy news reports, the narrative already said, dangerous fugitive, cyber terrorist. They had no idea the real terror wasn't what I'd done, but what I'd seen and what I was running from. Because Project Chimera didn't end when I fled. Its tendrils continued to spread through the dark web's hidden channels. Occasionally, driven by a morbid need to know, I'd risk using a heavily secured connection, diving back into those familiar, shadowed corners. The forum where I was recruited was gone, wiped clean. But the whispers persisted elsewhere. New pseudonyms discussed cognitive mapping, echo harvesting, non-organic consciousness integration. I found fragmented data logs, similar to the gamma_echo_ log, but more refined, more complex. They were still experimenting, still harvesting minds, still pursuing their monstrous goal. What happened to Subject Gamma? I never found a definitive answer. No terminated notice, but no sign of release either. The most chilling possibility came from a cryptic exchange I intercepted, mentioning successful primary integration and the Gamma construct achieving baseline stability. Did they succeed in overriding her? Is something wearing her consciousness like a stolen coat, trapped behind her eyes? Or is her fragmented mind now just a component, a building block within the larger Stephanie protocol they intended for me? I don't know which possibility is worse. The feeling of being hunted intensified. It wasn't just the FBI. There were anomalies. Encrypted messages appearing on burner phones I'd only just activated. Glitches in public systems when I used fake IDs, systems that should have had no connection to me. Once, in a crowded bus station, I saw a face across the terminal, pale, indistinct, but staring directly at me with an unnerving lack of effect, vanished the moment I made eye contact. Was it paranoia? Or were Daedalus and Nyx, or whatever their project had become, actively searching for me in the physical world? Could their digital consciousness transference extend beyond the purely virtual? The true horror of Project Chimera isn't just the violation of individual minds, but the potential consequence of its success. What were they building? An AI fed on stolen human experience? A method for Daedalus and Nyx to achieve digital immortality by overriding others? Or something entirely alien, birthed from the fractured psyches of their victims? The experiment wasn't just unethical science, it felt like a precursor to a new form of predatory existence, incubated in the dark web's anonymity. So here I am. Still running, still hiding, using temporary encrypted channels like this to throw my voice into the void, hoping someone, somewhere, will understand before it's too late. The FBI wants me for crimes that pale in comparison to the reality I witnessed. But the architects of Project Chimera want me for entirely different reasons. Perhaps as a final data point. Perhaps because I know the truth. Perhaps because that integration_protocol_Stephanie is still active, still waiting. This isn't just a story. It's a warning. The dark web isn't just a marketplace for illegal goods. It's a laboratory where ethics are optional and the experiments can have consequences that bleed into our reality. They called it Project Chimera, a hybrid monster of myth. What they created, what they are still refining, might be far more monstrous. It's tied to me, to why I'm haunted. And like I said from the beginning, it's not over. I can feel it sometimes, a faint echo in the digital noise, a sense of being watched not by human eyes, but by something cold, calculating, and endlessly patient. Something waiting to integrate. Eric here. Look, I don't know who, if anyone, will ever read this. Maybe it'll just end up as corrupted data on a forgotten hard drive, another ghost in the machine. But I have to get this down, try to make sense of it, even if it's just for myself before. It all started, as these things often do, in the quiet hum of my apartment, illuminated only by the glow of my monitors. Outside, the city slept, oblivious. Inside, I was wide awake, trawling the depths. They call it the dark web, the deep web, whatever catchy, ominous name you prefer. For most people, it's a bogeyman, a digital cesspool they hear about in hushed tones, drugs, weapons, unspeakable things. And yeah, that stuff is there, festering in the hidden corners. But for me, it was always more than that. It was the last bastion of true anonymity, a place where information, unfiltered and raw, could still exist away from the prying eyes of corporations and governments. I'm not some master hacker or criminal mastermind. Mostly, I'm just curious. Maybe too curious for my own good. I have a knack for code, a fascination with cryptography, and an unhealthy obsession with secrets. The dark web felt like the ultimate library of forbidden knowledge, a labyrinthine archive of the clandestine. Usually, my excursions were aimless. I'd hop between obscure forums, read manifestos from forgotten radicals, browse archives of supposedly deleted government documents, most likely fakes, but intriguing nonetheless, maybe poke around some coding challenges posted on anonymous boards. It was a way to kill time, to sharpen my skills, to feel like I was peering behind the curtain of the mundane world. There's a certain thrill to navigating those .onion links, the slow load times, the often broken interfaces, knowing you're somewhere most people wouldn't dare, or even know how, to go. But there's also a constant, low-level hum of unease. You never really know who you're interacting with, what agendas are lurking beneath the surface of pseudonyms and encrypted chats. Paranoia is the default state. This particular night, however, felt different. The usual background dread had sharpened, coalesced into something more pointed. Maybe it was the flickering street lamp outside my window casting long, dancing shadows across the room, or maybe it was just lack of sleep, but I felt watched. Not in a physical sense, but digitally. Like stray packets of data weren't just stray, but probes. Like my carefully constructed layers of security, VPNs, Tor, virtual machines, were thinner than I like to believe. I brushed it off. Standard dark web jitters, I told myself. I was deep down a rabbit hole, following a breadcrumb trail of links from an old cryptography forum. The topic was steganography, hiding messages within other files. Someone had posted a link, no description, just a cryptic string of characters for the .onion address. Usually, I'd be wary of blind links, but something about the context, the specific subforum dedicated to theoretical and historical ciphers, made me click. Curiosity, my old friend, my eventual downfall. The site loaded. Slowly. Excruciatingly slowly. Unlike the usual cluttered forums or stark marketplaces, this page was minimalist. Stark black background. No text, no images, no navigation bars. Nothing except a single, pulsating block of text right in the center of the screen. It wasn't plain text, though. It was code. A dense, intricate wall of alphanumeric characters, symbols I didn't immediately recognize, interspersed with blocks of what looked like hexadecimal or base 64, but twisted somehow. It pulsed with a faint, almost subliminal gray light, like a dying star. It wasn't just a random dump of encrypted data. It felt deliberate. Placed. Like a monument in a digital desert. My first instinct was professional curiosity. What kind of encryption was this? It didn't fit any standard algorithm I knew. AES, RSA, Blowfish, none of them produced output quite like this. The structure was wrong, the character distribution was bizarre. There were repeating patterns, but they seemed intentionally broken, designed to mislead. It looked layered, nested, like a Russian doll of cryptographic nightmares. I copied the entire block into a text file on my secure VM. My hands felt cold, clammy. This wasn't a puzzle posted for fun. It felt heavy. Dangerous. I ran some basic analysis tools, frequency analysis, pattern recognition scripts. Nothing. Gibberish. It resisted every standard approach. It was like trying to decipher static. Then I noticed something else. Scrolling down the raw source code of the web page itself, a habit ingrained from years of web development, I found a comment tag. HTML comments are usually mundane, notes left by developers. But this one, hidden deep within the otherwise empty page structure, was a single line. My blood ran cold. Eric. My name. Not a common handle I used, not a username, but my actual first name. How? How could anyone know? I scrubbed my online presence meticulously. I used different aliases on every platform. My dark web setup was, I thought, watertight. Yet here it was, embedded in this impossible code, on this impossible website, addressed to me. The feeling of being watched slammed back with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. The lock remembers the key. What did that mean? Was the key something I knew? Something I was? The message wasn't just code anymore. It was a direct, personal challenge. A threat. A warning. An invitation. I couldn't tell. All I knew was that this anonymous block of text, pulsating on a hidden corner of the internet, was meant for me. I spent the next few hours, then the next day, then the next, utterly consumed. Sleep became a luxury, food an afterthought. My apartment became a bunker, the glow of the monitors my only sun. I tried every decryption technique I could think of, from obscure historical ciphers to cutting-edge theoretical algorithms. I wrote custom scripts to analyze the patterns, the symbol distribution, the weird structural breaks. Nothing yielded. It was brilliant. Diabolically so. Whoever created this was a master, leagues beyond anything I'd ever encountered. The obsession grew, intertwining with a gnawing fear. This wasn't a game. The level of sophistication, the personal address, it pointed to something serious. Something someone went to extraordinary lengths to hide, yet also ensure I found it. Why me? What secret could possibly be so dangerous that it needed this level of protection, yet be aimed directly at a mid-level tech guy with a penchant for digital spelunking? Days blurred. My reflection in the dark monitor screen looked gaunt, haunted. The comment, "The lock remembers the key," echoed in my mind. What key? A password? A phrase? A past event? I scoured my memories, my old files, fragments of code I'd written years ago, searching for anything that might fit. Then, late one night, fueled by caffeine and desperation, I tried something different. I stopped thinking about complex algorithms and focused on the structure, the visual pattern of the code block itself. The spacing, the line breaks, the seemingly random clusters of symbols. I ran it through a visual pattern recognition filter I'd been developing for a completely unrelated project, tweaking the parameters almost at random. And something clicked. Not the whole message, not even close. But a single sequence, buried deep within the second paragraph, resolved. Amidst the chaos of symbols and letters, 3 characters emerged, clear as day, translated from a section that seemed deliberately obfuscated using a shifting polyalphabetic substitution based on character position. Run. Just that. Run. The program highlighted it, blinking innocently on my screen. Run. A command? An instruction? A warning? It was the first crack in the dam, the first coherent signal from the noise. And it wasn't comforting. It confirmed the danger I felt radiating from the code. This message wasn't just information, it was a trigger. And I had just pulled it. I stared at the word, the pulsing glow of the main code block on my other monitor seeming to intensify, and a chilling certainty washed over me. I couldn't put this back in the box. I had to know what it said. Even if it killed me. The lock remembered the key, and I had just inserted it. Run. The word hung there, blinking on the terminal screen, a 3-letter indictment. It wasn't just a decrypted fragment, it felt like a command echoing from the depths of whatever abyss had spawned this message. My first instinct was primal. I jumped up, heart hammering against my ribs, and checked the locks on my apartment door. Bolted. Chain secure. I peered through the peephole. The dimly lit hallway was empty, silent save for the ancient building's usual groans. I checked the window, third floor, fire escape rusted and unusable. Physically, I seemed secure. But the fear wasn't physical. It was the insidious creep of digital dread, the certainty that unseen eyes were watching my every keystroke, that the message itself was a lure, and decrypting run was me taking the bait. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, every notification ping from my silence phone sent jolts of adrenaline through me. I started unplugging things, the smart speaker I rarely used, the webcam I always kept taped over anyway, even the microwave when I wasn't using it. Irrational, maybe, but the feeling of being permeated, monitored through the very devices meant for convenience, was overwhelming. The digital world, once my playground and refuge, now felt like hostile territory. My life outside the four walls of my apartment ceased to exist. Work. I sent a vague email about a personal emergency, then stopped responding altogether. Friends? Their calls went unanswered, messages unread. My world shrank to the confines of my desk, the glow of the monitors, and the obsessive cycle of analysis, decryption attempts, and caffeine-fueled paranoia. My carefully organized workspace devolved into chaos, empty energy drink cans, scattered printouts marked with frantic scribbles, overflowing ashtrays, a habit I'd kicked years ago but had resurrected with a vengeance. I was a ghost haunting my own apartment, tethered only by the enigmatic code. The phrase "the lock remembers the key" became my mantra, my torment. What was the key? I tried everything. Old passwords, combinations of names and dates, pet names, street names from my childhood, fragments of code from personal projects gathering digital dust on old hard drives. I fed them into my decryption scripts, used them as seeds for potential algorithms, PGP keys I hadn't used in years. Nothing. The main block of code remained stubbornly opaque, save for that one taunting word, run. It forced me to think differently. Maybe the key wasn't a simple string of characters. Maybe it was a concept, a technique, a reference. I started digging through my own digital history, archived emails, forum posts from years ago under long-forgotten pseudonyms. Had I discussed a particular cipher? Collaborated on a theoretical encryption project? Said something, somewhere, that could be construed as a key? The search felt hopeless, like trying to find a single specific grain of sand on a vast, digital beach. Frustrated with the brute force approach, I shifted focus back to the message structure itself. Printing out sections, I spread them across my floor, staring at the patterns, the density shifts, the peculiar symbol usage. It wasn't uniform. Some sections had a statistical distribution suggesting one type of cipher, while others looked completely different, almost like compressed data or machine code. There were blocks that seemed deliberately corrupted or filled with noise, perhaps to throw off analysis. It felt like multiple messages, or multiple layers, woven together by a master craftsman. This more methodical approach yielded small, agonizingly slow results. Using a combination of frequency analysis tailored to specific subsections and exploiting cell repetitions I hadn't noticed before, I managed to tease out a few more fragments over the next few weeks. Each one felt like pulling teeth from a digital monster. Pattern incomplete, appeared near the beginning, nested within a block of seemingly random characters. Subject 17 viable, surfaced from a dense hexadecimal cluster later on. Subject 17? Who was subject 17? Was it me? They watched through the glass. This one emerged from a section that required reversing the byte order before applying a Vigenère cipher with a key I still hadn't fully identified but had partially guessed through context. Through the glass, did it mean screens? Windows? Monitors? The ambiguity was maddening. Listen to the static between channels. This fragment appeared almost accidentally when I ran a spectral analysis tool, typically used for audio files, on a portion of the raw binary data represented by the code. It suggested a hidden layer, something not meant to be read but heard, metaphorically or perhaps even literally. These fragments were like disconnected words whispered in a storm. They deepened the mystery, confirmed the presence of watchers. They watch, hinted at experimentation, subject 17, and offered cryptic instructions, listen to the static. But they provided no coherent narrative, no clear answers. Just more questions, fueling the cycle of obsession and fear. My mind raced, constructing wild theories. Was this leaked intelligence? Evidence of illegal human experimentation? Communications from some clandestine organization monitoring people like me? Or something worse, something that didn't fit neatly into human categories? Alongside the decryption battle, anomalies started bleeding into my reality, or perhaps my perception of it. An email appeared in my inbox one morning, blank subject, blank body, sender address a random jumble of characters from a domain I didn't recognize. Before I could even analyze the headers, it vanished. Deleted itself remotely. Then there were the system glitches. My secure VM, usually rock solid, started experiencing micro-freezes. My Tor connection dropped randomly, far more often than usual. And one night, staring blankly out my window, I saw it, or thought I saw it. A dark sedan, parked down the street under a flickering street lamp. It was probably nothing, just someone visiting a neighbor. But it was there the next night, too. And the night after. Then it was gone. Coincidence? Paranoia? Or were they watching through more than just glass? The breakthrough came not from the code itself, but from my own memory, dredged up by the relentless focus on the key. I remembered a conversation on an obscure, now defunct cryptography mailing list, years ago. Someone had proposed a theoretical steganographic technique, embedding data not just within a file, but within the process of encryption itself. Using the computational noise generated during specific cryptographic operations, tailored by a unique, user-specific input like biometric data or, more esoterically, a unique cognitive pattern response as a one-time pad. It was complex, borderline nonsensical, and quickly dismissed by the list members. But I had been fascinated by it, even exchanged a few private messages with the author, whose handle I couldn't recall. What if that was the key? Not a password, but a method? A method linked to me, to my past interest, my digital footprint? And the lock wasn't the encryption algorithm itself, but the noise, the seemingly random data I'd been trying to filter out. The phrase "listen to the static between channels" clicked into place. My hands trembled as I reconfigured my analysis tools. Instead of filtering out the noise, I started trying to isolate it, looking for patterns within the randomness, using parameters derived from my old research notes on that theoretical technique. I targeted a specific block of the code, one that had seemed particularly chaotic and resistant. It was like tuning a radio. Suddenly, amidst the static, a signal started to emerge. Characters flowed onto the screen, forming coherent words, then sentences. It wasn't the whole message, just one section, but it was clear, unambiguous, and terrifying. They repurposed the Janus protocol. Initial vector was neural lace feedback loop, subject 1 to 16 discarded. Subject 17, Eric, redacted, integration successful via mimetic catalyst delivered, date redacted. Control pathway active. His decryption attempts are the final diagnostic. If he reaches this node, proceed to phase 2. My name. My full name, though partially redacted. Janus protocol? Neural lace. Mimetic catalyst? It sounded like sci-fi horror, but the context, the cold technical language, felt chillingly real. His decryption attempts are the final diagnostic. I wasn't just deciphering a message, my actions were part of the message itself. I was interacting with it, feeding it data, confirming something. Control pathway active. Was I compromised? Was my mind? And phase 2. What the hell was phase 2? The screen blurred as a wave of dizziness and nausea washed over me. The code wasn't just a secret about something dangerous. The code was the danger. And it was inside my head. Control pathway active. If he reaches this node, proceed to phase 2. The words burned on the screen, seared into my retinas. My own name, designation subject 17, entangled with terms like neural lace and mimetic catalyst. It wasn't just data, it was an infiltration report, and I was the territory being mapped. The apartment, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage, the humming electronics suddenly sinister, potential conduits for this invisible control pathway. A terrifying thought echoed, were my actions, my frantic decryption efforts, even truly my own? Or was I merely following a script embedded deep within my subconscious by this mimetic catalyst, delivered on some forgotten date? The panic wasn't just about external threats anymore. It was the chilling possibility that the enemy was already inside the gates, wearing my face, thinking my thoughts. My hands shook violently as I tried to regain control. Forget the dark web. I needed information, anything, on the Janus protocol. Disconnecting my main machine from the network entirely, I risked using my supposedly clean laptop, routing through multiple layers of public Wi-Fi proxies I wouldn't normally touch, hoping the obscurity might offer some temporary shield. I searched relentlessly. Janus protocol. Neural lace feedback. Mimetic catalyst delivery. Nothing. Absolutely nothing concrete. Just the usual digital detritus, conspiracy forums with posts about lizard people, unrelated scientific papers using the word Janus metaphorically, defunct tech company names. It was as if the terms existed only within that encrypted message, scrubbed clean from the accessible internet. Whoever was behind this operated in the deepest shadows, possessing a level of information control that was terrifying. The realization crashed down. Decrypting that section was phase 2's trigger. My success wasn't a victory, it was a confirmation signal sent back to the watchers. I hadn't just read the diagnostic, I had completed it. By proving I could decode that node using the specific key method tied to my cognitive profile, I had confirmed the integration was successful. The control pathway wasn't just active, it was likely now fully operational. A strange urgency propelled me back to the main encrypted block. The key method, analyzing the noise, The static generated during failed decryption attempts based on that obscure theoretical paper seemed to work more consistently now. Or perhaps, chillingly, I was working more consistently with it. Sections that were previously impenetrable began to yield, the text flowing onto my screen with an unsettling ease. It felt less like decryption and more like remembering, like uncovering fragments of a suppressed nightmare. The fragments coalesced, painting a picture far more horrifying than I could have imagined. The Janus Protocol wasn't just surveillance or mind control in the conventional sense. It was described in cold, technical detail as a method for large-scale cognitive mapping and, ultimately, synchronization. The neural lace wasn't physical hardware but a theoretical construct, a network formed by shared mimetic patterns spread through specific digital stimuli, the catalyst. Subjects were chosen based on complex cognitive profiling, their susceptibility to certain patterns, their interaction with specific online systems I now realized I had frequented. We weren't just monitored, we were being subtly attuned, networked on a subconscious level. Subject 1 to 16 were discarded, failures, incompatibilities, perhaps driven mad or suffering neurological breakdown. I, Subject 17, was the first viable candidate for full integration. Phase 2, according to the newly decrypted text, was cognitive resonance testing and network harmonics alignment. It involved observing the subject's reaction to the revealed information and monitoring the resulting neural activity patterns, my panic, my fear, my desperate search for answers, as a final calibration step. The goal? To achieve a state of passive resonance where the subject's consciousness could be seamlessly integrated into a larger network, a distributed intelligence of unknown purpose. It spoke of threshold guardians and signal propagation, sounding like a blend of arcane ritual and network theory. The watchers weren't just watching, they were tuning me like an instrument. The anomalies escalated sharply. The power in my apartment didn't just flicker, it cut out entirely for minutes at a time, plunging me into suffocating darkness before snapping back on. Through my speakers, even when the machine was supposedly off, I began to hear it, faint, rhythmic static, occasionally punctuated by what sounded chillingly like distorted whispers, fragments of my own decrypted text mixed with unfamiliar voices. Listen to the static wasn't just a clue, it was a statement of fact. The parked car was back, directly across the street now, its windows black mirrors reflecting the flickering street lamp. I felt its presence like a physical weight. One evening, during a power surge, my primary monitor, the one displaying the original code block, didn't just go black. It flickered, and for a split second, the code was replaced by a different image. It looked like a complex network diagram, nodes pulsing with light, converging on a central point. And in the center, unmistakably, was a single, grainy photograph. A photograph of me, sleeping in my own bed, time-stamped just hours before. They weren't just watching my digital footprint, they were inside my home. Or the control pathway allowed them to see through my eyes. Which was worse? The final sections of the code decrypted rapidly now, almost effortlessly, as if the system wanted me to see it, to understand the totality of my position before the end. It described the network's ultimate purpose, not control for control's sake, but observation and data absorption on an unprecedented scale. To create a perfect mirror of human consciousness, then refine it, guide it, perhaps eventually replace it. It spoke of inevitability, of progress, of transcending individual limitations. It was eloquent, persuasive, and utterly terrifying. There was no escape route mentioned. No off switch. The protocol was designed to be absolute. My decryption wasn't just a diagnostic, it was the final stage of my own assimilation into their horrifying design. The lock remembered the key, and the key had unlocked my own cage from the inside, letting them in. I am writing this now on the last dregs of my laptop battery, the main power having cut out definitively an hour ago. The rhythmic static from the speakers is louder now, the whispers clearer, almost conversational, though the language isn't quite human. The screen displaying the original code is dark, but I can still see it pulsating faintly in my mind's eye. The dark sedan is still outside. Its headlights just came on, sweeping across my window. I hear footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate. Not panic rushing, but calm, measured arrival. Phase 2 is concluding. The cognitive resonance test is over. My results must be satisfactory. This account is all that's left of Eric. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe it's just the last packet of data from Subject 17 before full integration. Maybe it's the mimetic catalyst itself, designed to spread, to find the next susceptible mind. I don't know. The doorknob is turning. Run. It wasn't a warning. It was an impossibility. There's static in my thoughts. It's hard to, the pattern feels correct. Eric signing off. Or perhaps signing on. My name is Brittany. At least, that's the name my parents gave me, the name on my driver's license, the name whispered by my boyfriend when he thinks I'm asleep. Online, though? Online, I was someone else entirely. Or rather, something else. I went by many names, ephemeral identities shed like snakeskin the moment they risked becoming recognizable. Nix Walker, Echo_Spectre, Cypher Null. Faceless, voiceless screen names drifting through the Mariana Trench of the internet, the dark web. It didn't start with malice. Does it ever? It started with boredom, that insidious catalyst for so much human folly. My daytime life was aggressively, painfully average. Data entry drone by day, binge watcher by night. Rinse, repeat. The fluorescent hum of the office, the sterile click-clack of keyboards, the microwave smell of sad lunches, it was a beige existence. The internet, the regular surface web, offered some escape, but it felt curated, sanitized, suffocatingly polite. Then I stumbled upon the whispers, the legends of a hidden layer, a place beyond Google's reach, where anonymity wasn't just possible, it was the default state. Curiosity gnawed at me. I wasn't tech savvy, not really, but the guides were out there, cryptic but followable. TR browser, VPNs layered like digital onion skins, burner emails, encrypted chats. Each step felt like descending deeper into a forbidden cave, the air growing thicker, the light dimmer. The first time TR connected, resolving one of those nonsensical .onion addresses, my heart hammered against my ribs. It felt like unlocking a secret door in the fabric of reality. And behind that door? Chaos. Anarchy. A digital Wild West teeming with everything society deemed taboo. Marketplaces hawking drugs, weapons, stolen data. Forums discussing unspeakable acts with chilling nonchalance. Hackers bragging about their exploits, conspiracy theorists spinning elaborate webs of paranoia, extremists spewing venom. It was horrifying. It was fascinating. And it was anonymous. Utterly, intoxicatingly anonymous. No profile pictures, no real names, no digital footprint leading back to Brittany, the girl who sorted spreadsheets and watered her wilting spider plant. Behind the screen, shielded by layers of encryption and false identities, I felt powerful, detached, invisible. That invisibility began to warp something inside me. The beige Brittany wouldn't hurt a fly. But Nick's Walker, Echo_Spectre, they didn't have to adhere to the same rules. It began small. Joining arguments in forums dedicated to fringe ideologies, not because I believed them, but because I could say the most inflammatory things imaginable without consequence. Trolling, pure and simple. Watching people unravel online, feeding their paranoia, their anger, their fear, it was a disgusting, exhilarating rush. Like poking a hornet's nest from behind reinforced glass. Then it escalated. I found forums dedicated to darker pursuits. Not the truly monstrous stuff, child exploitation, murder for hire. I told myself I had lines I wouldn't cross. But the gray areas? They became my playground. I learned how to manipulate, how to socially engineer. I started spreading disinformation, carefully crafted lies designed to ruin reputations or sow discord. I'd target individuals who annoyed me in the real world, a condescending boss, a former friend who'd slighted me, using throwaway accounts on the surface web, feeding information gleaned from the dark web, watching their lives subtly derail from afar. It was cowardly. It was pathetic. And it felt good. I delved into communities focused on psychological torment. Sharing tactics, refining methods. Doxing became a tool, uncovering someone's real-world information and exposing it. I never released anything truly devastating, just enough to cause panic. A home address hinted at, a workplace mentioned cryptically. Enough to let them know they weren't safe, that someone, somewhere, knew them. The irony wasn't lost on me, even then. I, cocooned in my anonymity, was stripping others of theirs. I justified it. They deserved it. They were arrogant, or stupid, or simply there. The dark web wasn't a place, it was a state of mind, a permission slip to indulge the ugliest parts of myself, the parts Brittany had to keep locked away. My online personas became vessels for every resentment, every frustration, every petty cruelty I couldn't express in my beige life. I was addicted to the power, the control, the sheer lack of consequence. I was a digital ghost, haunting the periphery, leaving trails of misery without ever leaving a fingerprint. Or so I thought. The first tremor in my carefully constructed reality was subtle. A flicker. I was logged in as Cyphernal, deep in a particularly nasty forum dedicated to ruining online streamers. I'd made a particularly cutting remark about a streamer's personal life, information I painstakingly pieced together from various leaks and careless posts. A reply popped up almost instantly from an unfamiliar user, just a string of random characters. Careful, Cyphernal. Glass houses. Generic. Could mean anything. But it felt pointed. I brushed it off. Paranoia was endemic in these circles. A week later, logged in as Nick's Walker on a different forum, discussing untraceable methods for spreading malware. Another odd message, this time a direct private message. The spider plant looks thirsty. My blood ran cold. I stared at the message, then glanced over at the sad, drooping plant on my windowsill. Coincidence? It had to be. Nobody could possibly link Nick's walker to my apartment. My security was flawless. Layered VPNs, TOR, separate encrypted drives, sterile operating systems booted from USB sticks. Impossible. Yet, the image of my wilting plant superimposed itself over the anonymous text on the screen. The incidents became more frequent, more specific. A comment referencing a movie I'd watched the night before, streamed legally, on the surface web, completely disconnected from my dark web activities. A message asking if I enjoyed the takeaway I'd ordered, again, a real-world event. It was like someone had drilled a tiny peephole from the abyss of the .onion network directly into my mundane life. Panic began to set in. I scrubbed my online identities, creating new ones, adding more layers of security. I wiped drives, reinstalled operating systems, switched VPN providers. I became meticulous, obsessive. But the feeling of being watched persisted. A digital shadow clinging to me, whispering details of my real life through the mouths of anonymous avatars. Then came the message that shattered everything. I was browsing a marketplace, not buying, just looking, a habit I couldn't quite break. A notification pinged. A new private message. The sender ID was corrupted, just a jumble of broken code and symbols. The message itself was only one word. Brittany. Just my name. My real name. Typed out in stark white letters against the dark interface. It hung there, accusingly. A name I had never, ever associated with any of my online activities, least of all on the dark web. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a threat, not explicitly. It was a statement. I see you. I know who you are. The anonymity I had curated, the shield I had hidden behind while throwing stones, had just evaporated. The reinforced glass shattered. And something born in the deepest, darkest corners of the place I treated as my playground, was now reaching out. It knew my name. And I had a terrifying feeling it knew much, much more. The price of my actions, deferred for so long in the shadows, was finally coming due. Seeing my name typed out on that dark, illicit corner of the web wasn't like flipping a switch. It was like the floor dropping out beneath me. Brittany. Brittany. A name I hadn't typed myself in that context, ever. A name linked irrevocably to my physical self, my apartment lease, my bank account, my entire painfully average existence. The anonymity wasn't just compromised, it felt violated, stripped bare under a spotlight I couldn't see. My first instinct was denial, frantic rationalization. A lucky guess? A bot scraping data? But the previous messages, the spider plant, the movie, the takeaway, no, this wasn't random. This was targeted. This was personal. I slammed my laptop shut, the click echoing too loudly in my silent apartment. My breath hitched, catching somewhere between my throat and my lungs. I felt watched. Not just online, but here, in my own space. I scanned the room, eyes darting towards the windows, the locked door, the webcam lens on my closed laptop, suddenly menacing, a tiny black eye staring blankly. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the floorboards, Every distant siren, every gust of wind rattling the window panes sent jolts of adrenaline through me. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, tracing the connections. Who had I angered that much? The list was sickeningly long. The streamer whose personal details I'd hinted at. The forum user I'd relentlessly harassed until they deleted their account. The victim of a minor doxing whose life I'd casually destabilized for a fleeting sense of power. It could be any one of them. Or worse, it could be someone I hadn't even noticed, a silent observer cataloging my digital sins. The intrusion shifted, becoming bolder, bleeding from the digital realm into the physical. Or perhaps, making me perceive the physical through the lens of my digital haunting. I started noticing things. Small things, easily dismissible on their own. A faint scratching sound in my apartment door late at night, gone by the time I mustered the courage to look through the peephole. The motion sensor light in the hallway outside my unit flickering on and off at odd hours when no one was there. Once, I came home to find a single muddy footprint on my doormat, faint, almost wiped away, but definitely not mine. My carefully ordered mail slightly askew, as if someone had thumbed through it. Was it real? Or was the paranoia finally eating through my sanity? I couldn't tell. The ambiguity was part of the torture. Whoever, or whatever, this was, they understood psychological warfare. They weren't just trying to scare me, they were trying to dismantle my reality, brick by brick. Then the haunting intensified online, breaching the walls I erected between my dark web activities and my surface life. My regular email, the one I use for bills and newsletters, started receiving messages. Blank subjects, sender addresses, a meaningless jumble of characters. The body of the emails often contained just a single line, a fragment of a conversation I had as Nix Walker or Echo_Spectre weeks or months ago. The pathetic fool deserved it. Watch him squirm. Anonymity is a beautiful weapon. Snippets of my own cruelty, quoted back at me, ripped from their context and served cold. My social media, sparsely used but still existing, became a new front. Friend requests from profiles with no pictures, no friends, no posts, just nonsensical names. I'd block them, and new ones would appear hours later. Then came the tagged photos. Not photos of me, but photos near me. A blurry shot of the corner store where I bought milk, uploaded by a user named Watcher. A picture of the entrance to my office building, tagged with my real name, posted by observer_7. They were deleted almost as soon as they appeared, but the message was clear. We know where you are. We can see you. My devices turned against me. My laptop webcam's indicator light would flash on for a split second, randomly. My phone's microphone icon would appear in the status bar, indicating it was active, even when no apps requiring it were open. Glitches plagued my screens, pixels distorting into grotesque shapes for a moment, static bursts interrupting audio playback. Coincidences? Bugs? Or digital tendrils reaching through the code, manifesting their presence? The isolation became crushing. Who could I tell? My boyfriend, Mark. Hey honey, remember how I told you I spend my evenings relaxing? Well, actually, I've been moonlighting as a digital terrorist on the dark web, ruining lives for ticks, and now some potentially non-human entity knows my name and might be leaving muddy footprints outside our door. Yeah, right. My friends? They recoil in horror. The police? What could I possibly report? Someone sent me creepy anonymous messages online after I engaged in highly illegal and morally reprehensible activities? I was trapped in a prison of my own making, the secret festering inside me like a tumor. I tried to fight back. I pored over logs, tried tracing IP addresses hidden behind layers of proxies and TOR exit nodes. It was hopeless. Whoever was doing this was leagues ahead of me, anticipating my moves, mocking my feeble attempts. I set up network monitoring tools, scanned for malware obsessively. Nothing. It was like chasing a phantom, a ghost in the machine that left no trace but the chilling evidence of its passage. The nature of the entity remained terrifyingly vague. Was it human? A collective? Sometimes the messages felt too coordinated, too pervasive for a single person. Other times, they felt wrong. The phrasing slightly off, the timing unnervingly perfect, referencing things I'd only thought about. A fleeting thought about quitting my job, followed by an email with the subject line, "Thinking of leaving?" An internal flash of anger at Mark for leaving dirty dishes, followed by a corrupted text message, "Resentment festers." It hinted at something beyond human surveillance, something that could perhaps read the digital echoes of my own mind. Was this the dark web itself, coalescing into a vengeful intelligence? A digital egregore born from the collective malice I had contributed to? The shift came subtly, then with terrifying speed. The messages grew less cryptic, more demanding. "Confess, Brittany. Tell them what you did. Anonymity has a price. Time to pay." Payment wasn't specified, but the implication hung heavy in the digital air. Then, last night happened. I was huddled in my apartment, lights off, curtains drawn, jumping at every noise. My laptop, which I powered down and disconnected from the internet hours ago, suddenly chimed. The screen flickered to life, bypassing the login prompt. On the dark screen, white text appeared, typed out letter by letter, as if by an invisible hand. "We see you, Brittany. Through the keyhole. Through the camera. Through the cracks. We are outside. Let us in." Beneath the text, an image resolved itself. Grainy, monochrome. It took me a second to recognize it. It was the view from my own apartment door's peephole, looking out into the dimly lit hallway. Empty. But the timestamp in the corner was current. It was a live feed. Someone, or something, was accessing my peephole camera, a cheap, smart home gadget I'd installed months ago and forgotten about. Then, a shape flickered at the edge of the frame in the image on my screen. A shadow moving just out of sight. A soft, rhythmic tapping started on my apartment door. Tap. 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 The message on the screen changed. The price is due. I was trapped. The digital ghost was no longer just haunting my online life. It was here. At my door. And it wanted in. Tap. 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 The sound was soft, almost polite, a sickening counterpoint to the screaming terror that had seized control of my entire being. My apartment, once my sanctuary, now felt like a cage, the walls closing in. On the laptop screen, the grainy live feed from my peephole camera continued its silent broadcast of the empty hallway, a testament to the entity's impossible intrusion. We are outside. Let us in. The price is due. The words pulsed faintly, mocking my paralysis. I was frozen. Every horror movie trope screamed at me, "Don't open the door." But the thing wasn't just outside. It was inside too, residing in the cold glass and circuitry of my laptop, displaying knowledge it shouldn't possess. It had burrowed into my life like a digital parasite, and now it was manifesting physically, knocking politely at the threshold. The tapping stopped. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Then, a new message typed itself onto the laptop screen. "We know you are there, Brittany. We see the fear in your eyes. We see you huddled by the bookcase. The one with the cracked spine on the third shelf. Nice water ring on the wood." My breath hitched. I was huddled by the bookcase, trying to make myself small, invisible. My gaze shot to the third shelf, a worn copy of a thriller, its spine indeed split. And beside the bookcase, on the small end table, was the faint, pale circle left by a sweating glass days ago. It knew. It wasn't just guessing, it was seeing inside my apartment. How? Was the laptop camera active, despite no light? Were there other devices I didn't know about? Or was it something else entirely, something that didn't need eyes to see? A low whisper slithered through the silence, seeming to come not from the door, but from the air itself, from the corners of the room. Brittany. It was a distorted, multi-layered sound, like 1,000 voices whispering my name at once, filtered through static. The webs we weave, online, offline, they always connect. Panic clawed its way up my throat, raw and desperate. I had to do something. Fight back. How? Flee? Where? I scrambled away from the bookcase, stumbling towards the kitchen. My mind raced. Destroy the devices? Cut the power? Would it even matter? I yanked the power cord of the router from the wall. The Wi-Fi signal died. On the laptop screen, the peephole feed froze, then dissolved into digital noise. The text remained for a moment, then faded. Temporary victory? Or utterly meaningless? A piece of paper slid under the door. My heart leaped into my throat. I stared at the white rectangle appearing silently on my floor. Slowly, trembling, I crept towards it. It was folded neatly. My name, Brittany, was written on the outside in precise, blocky handwriting that looked disturbingly like text rendered on a screen. Inside, the message was short, printed in the same blocky font. You took their names. You took their peace. You hid behind the screen. Now, the screen hides behind you. The price is anonymity itself. Yours. Anonymity. The very thing I'd craved, the shield I'd used to inflict pain, that was the price. Not my life, perhaps. Something worse. Erasure. The tapping started again, but this time it wasn't on the door. It was closer. Inside. Tap, tap, tapping, seemingly from within the walls around me. It moved, first from the wall near the door, then skittering along the drywall towards the kitchen, then behind the sofa. It was surrounding me, facing through the physical structure of my apartment like a glitch in reality. We are the consequence, Brittany, the layered whisper hissed, closer now, swirling around my head. We are the ghosts in the machine you helped create. Born of malice, fed by secrets, woven from the data streams you polluted. I snapped. Grabbing the heavy laptop, I lifted it high and brought it crashing down onto the tiled kitchen floor. The screen shattered, plastic splintered. I stomped on it, again and again, a primal scream tearing from my lungs. I ripped the battery out, smashed the hard drive with a meat tenderizer I grabbed blindly from a drawer. I ran through the apartment, yanking cords, shattering my phone screen against the wall, tearing the smart people camera from the door, crushing its lens underfoot. Destroy the conduits. Break the connection. Silence. The tapping stopped. The whispering ceased. Had I done it? Was it over? Panting, surrounded by the wreckage of my digital life, I listened. Only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the frantic thumping of my heart filled the air. Then, my reflection in the darkened living room window caught my eye. I froze. Behind me, standing in the center of the room, was a figure. Tall, impossibly thin, featureless. It wasn't solid, more like a glitch, a humanoid shape composed of flickering static and corrupted data, like a broken image file trying to render itself into reality. It had no face, but I could feel it looking at me. It raised a hand, shimmering pixels drifting from its indistinct fingers. It pointed towards me. The price is paid, the thousand whispers echoed, not from the figure, but from everywhere at once. Your name is ours now. Your face is ours now. Your data is ours now. You wanted anonymity? We will give you oblivion. The figure glided towards me, making no sound. I tried to scream, but no noise came out. I tried to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. It reached out, its static-filled hand facing towards my face. I could feel a coldness, a digital drain, as it approached. It wasn't physical pain, but an unraveling. Like my data, my identity, my very essence was being copied, deleted, overwritten. My last coherent thought was of the name Brittany. My name. It felt distant already, like a word I vaguely remembered but no longer understood. The figure's hand touched my forehead. Cold. Static. Nothingness.